Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to see all my old friends that are here. Best dressed always, right there. It is an amazing moment in this world, this nation, and in this city. I just came out of my car. I was driving through traffic. I had an event over at Shutters where we were talking about this entrepreneurial moment in Los Angeles between Hollywood and technology. And the book that I'm reading is a book about William Mulholland that came out last year. It's a book that chronicles the history of this city and its growth. And I'm right now in the chapter where the people of Los Angeles vote 10,000 and something to a few hundred for a bond to construct the Los Angeles Aqueduct, something that changed the history of this city, but also changed what happened to our friends in Owens Valley and a great lake that was there. And it hit me while I was driving here what power we have as a city. It's at once local, and I love what you just said because Los Angeles is both a place and an idea, but it's also national and global. And in this urgent moment when we are looking for the shifting sands that are underneath us to kind of stabilize, when the earth is under attack like never before and where our politics and our values feel under attack like never before, we might ask, where do we hold on to something that's a little bit stronger? Los Angeles is a place that is always stood up for not just speaking up, but acting out and embodying the values that I believe are what we need in this moment in time. And EMA has always been in some ways the articulation of that, because Los Angeles, our great founders of this organization, the Lears and the Horns, have been part of this tradition here of being the greatest storytellers and story makers in the world. And this intersection of the urgency of our politics and our policies and our actions, together with what we say and how we narrate a moment, is what LA does best and what EMA has done so well for so long. This room is about as LA a room as you will find. People who are the embodiment of that activism and of that articulation. This is a city that drives innovation. It creates technology to deal with our most pressing problems, from climate change to social and economic justice. And when we look at this moment when some may question, where do we go? And some of you may have been at the march where 750,000 people came out the day after our new president's inauguration to stand up for women's rights and for progressive politics. It was kind of actually perverse to call it a march because it was so crowded. It was like, let's all get together and not move gathering. But I said that day, it's not just what we say, which is critically important. Ultimately, what we'll be judged by is what we do. And so in that context, if we believe in women's rights, I said, don't just come out here today and speak out for it. Show up tomorrow at the Downtown Women's Center and find a survivor of domestic violence living in a tent today who needs to be housed. If you believe in women's rights today, show up tomorrow to the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking and get 13 and 14-year-old girls who are trafficked on the streets of the city off the street. Show up at the airport and help a woman refugee and her family get into this country because they've been waiting for 8 years and they're here legally despite an executive order trying to keep them out. Or run for office if you're a woman. Do things that actually take the power that we have and don't cede it. And I think with the environment at this moment, it's the same thing. Since I've been mayor here, I've tried to take my work and my belief in our shared interest in sustainability and desegregate it. Take it away from being an issue area, maybe one that we all have liked and worked in for a long time, and instead wash it over all the work of this city to make it a prism through which we refract everything we do. I did that by making sure that every general manager and executive director, from our airport to our port to our fire department to our public works department, all have a responsibility for sustainability, not just the obvious departments like water and power or the Bureau of Sanitation. So that when they come to me for their yearly assessment every year, I say, what are you doing for sustainability? And I proudly, at my cabinet meeting a couple months ago, the police chief didn't just tell me what the crime statistics were, he told me how much paper his department had saved this year and how many trees that was worth because finally they were moving towards electronic printing and other ways to save the resources. When a fire chief is talking about the number of trips that his firefighter paramedics have to take to hospitals back and forth and how much gas that uses up, but instead by having nurse practitioners who can treat and release people in the communities that they're in, he saw it through a sustainability lens. And you can see how it stops being just an issue area that some of us care about and it becomes a more universal value to inform all of our action together. And if there was ever a time in which kind of tossing out the old ways of doing things and looking forward to a new way of embracing this as a value as opposed to an issue area, I think the time is now. And the urgency of today is that if somebody told us a year ago that we would be seeing a presidential budget that wipes out EPA's efforts to fight climate change, that there would be witch hunts to say, are you even trying to measure climate change? And if so, we want to know who you are at the Energy Department, now led by somebody who wanted to abolish it. We would say this is some sort of surreal Kafkaesque play that you're telling us about. This cannot be our country. But it is. And the flip side of that is don't get depressed. Don't despair. Don't curl up in a corner someplace. Because the power that we have is right in our hands. And the work that we have to do has always been just in front of us. There is no Washington, D.C. administration or Congress that can take away the power I have as your mayor to make sure that our Department of Water and Power not only gets off of coal, but weans itself off of carbon for the generation of the energy that we consume. There is no president who can say we can't buy the largest fleet of electric vehicles, as we have now done, overnight, taking all the non-patrol cars that are used by Los Angeles Police Department, for instance, and making them pure battery electric vehicles that reduced the cost, by the way, of those vehicles by 40% in a single year and cleaned up the air, or contributed cleaning up the air overnight. No president can tell me not to make our building regulations stronger, and business interests have a mutual interest in this because it reduces what they pay for water and power. The people of Los Angeles can do, as we did during the historic drought years of the last few years, reduce their water consumption by 20%, so that this can be a second Mulholland moment, not one where we steal water, but where we generate, as we put forward in our city's sustainability plan, that by 2035, 50% of our water will come from local sources instead of foreign sources. I don't mean other countries, but outside of the city. And I think the work that EMA has always done to push us forward, to tell the story and then to demand the action, is what I hope that I can contribute to just a little bit today. We're taking on some of the most stubborn challenges that this city has faced, whether it's poverty and homelessness, whether it's traffic and transportation. And we're tying these together with sustainability so that our Sustainable City Plan, which I think is the boldest such plan that any city has put out in America, the hiring of a Chief Sustainability Officer, Matt Peterson, many of you know for the first time, who came from Global Green, so that we had somebody to help monitor that with an extraordinary team, that these things tied together for the first time, not just the environment, but the economy and equity, so that we would make sure everything we were doing also looked at social and economic justice while we were looking at our earth justice as well. And the leadership that I want to tell you about today is in the fight against climate change. In the Sustainable City Plan, these principles of conservation, of clean energy, of green jobs, of transportation, of livability, of job opportunity. The overarching purpose of the plan, of course, is to protect the environment, but it's also to grow our economy and to offer hope to every Angelino, no matter where she lives, no matter what zip code she is born into. And it's not a document that we created to just stick on a shelf. It's one that has real accountability, that you can say, hey, Mayor, you didn't meet your 1-year goal, your 3-year goal, your 5-year goal, your 10-year goal, or you can say we did meet it together, but something that holds me and all of us accountable. And I was proud to announce just a few weeks ago at our second year check-in on this that we've already met 2/3 of the goals that we need to meet by the end of this year. So in the last 2 years, we were able to, as I mentioned, reduce our water by 20%. We've saved enough water to fill more than 90,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, just to picture that for a moment. The plan has helped us to unlock innovation, to spur collaboration through state cap-and-trade dollars. Los Angeles is building the nation's first EV car share for low-income communities. It's about bringing cleaner transportation options, and thank you to Los Angeles voters who, after 3 years of us organizing and 3 months of a campaign, passed the nation's most ambitious and far-reaching infrastructure and transportation initiative ever in the nation's history, ×2 with Measure M, something that will expand or build 15 rail lines in our city. Unprecedented for any city to do it in such a short amount of time in Los Angeles County, to link us and connect us together, and to boil in and bake in the first mile and last mile connections, like the Dash line we just announced yesterday that'll take us from the Red Line up to Griffith Park, because it's also how you get to and from those main lines. The ways that we can look at bike lanes and car share and pedestrian-oriented development as well. We've created over 20,000 jobs in the green sectors just in the last 2 years. in energy efficiency, water infrastructure, solar, recycling, and our clean tech incubator is the #1 clean tech incubator in the world. From Vice President Biden to heads of states that come through, over $120 billion in investment it has attracted in the Arts District downtown. But it's been a real model for Los Angeles, putting down some of our public money with private investment and innovation, and using this amazing platform we have of where we control the largest port in America, one of the busiest airports in the world, the largest municipal utility. So we don't have to ask people permission. We can actually enact your great ideas and policies right here in those assets that we commonly own together. And the Lacretz campus, that's what it's called for the Clean Tech Incubator, is one of the top now innovation and test beds in the nation. Now, I encourage all of you, I don't know, so a few of you might be here from out of town, but go visit it. You will see the new LA, a place where we've absolutely obliterated the old tired debate between jobs and the environment, because we're doing well for both with this, where you can see the creativity of this incredible city, of the universities, the only city in the country to have 3 top 25 universities, the engineers that are changing tomorrow, and the ways that we are committed to reducing our impact on the environment, including our greenhouse gas emissions. And recently, we've been bringing together, I've tried to be a leader as a mayor to bring together my sister and brother mayors around the country, whether it's standing up against the letter that I wrote that we have over 75 cities have signed on to President Trump to say, do not retreat, and we will not retreat. And if you get out of Paris, we're going to adopt Paris ourselves, to do the work that shows us that this is an American cause, not an ideological one, or whether it's the way that we're coming together. Like with electric vehicle purchases, we've now brought together cities and states throughout the United States for a common RFP, request for proposals, to our electric vehicle manufacturers to say that from buses and heavy equipment to our fleet vehicles, we want to see car companies step up. And those cities combined, get this, would, if overnight the car companies were giving us the electric vehicles we need, would increase by 50% the EV sales in this country in a single year. So again, the power we have individually, the power we have as the city, the power we have coming together as cities, that's where the power in this country and this world has always been. I serve as vice chair of C40, the environmental organization of mayors and cities around the world that's now many more than 40 cities. But we know that cities are home to half of the world's population, 70% of all the greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to be working on this together. When I went down to meet with Jefe de Gobierno Miguel Mancera, that's the fancy title for he's head of government, but the mayor of Mexico City, we steal each other's best ideas, so bike share and air pollution reduction. I shared our experience with smog reduction here in this city so that Mexico City, which is choking on its pollution, can do better. I looked at his bus rapid transit lines because today at the MTA we voted to move forward as part of Measure M along the Vermont corridor, a BRT or a rail line that is on a corridor that is second only to Wilshire Boulevard in the traffic in the city. And so in each of our roles, in each of our areas, we have so much power to exercise as long as we don't cede it to anyone. And here in LA, there is no city, or here in America, there's no city I'd rather be in, maybe even arguably in this world, than right here, where that intersection of being able to not only tell stories, but to make them, to not just mark history, but to write it together, is before us. And I want to thank everybody in the entertainment industry who's a part, not just of mirroring that, but of being that, of informing people about this moment, our role to play, and how ultimately we are unstoppable. Unstoppable. The earth demands it, our families demand it, our economy needs it, and each one of us knows what we have been able to do and that we will continue to do. So keep up the great work, count on us at City Hall. Whatever far-flung idea you might have, take this as a visionary moment. Los Angeles has these decades every 40 years or so. It happened in the 1900s in that Mulholland moment. It happened in the 1940s, 30s to 40s. It happened in the 1980s. And this is one of those moments where whether it's trying to bring the Olympics back here in 2024, whether it's the revitalization of the LA River and having geniuses like Frank Gehry work on that and voters pass things like Measure M that will connect that river, whether it's those moments where we can look at the community plans that will dictate how growth happens in this city and think about that in a different way so that we're no longer the car capital of the world, but perhaps the multimodal transportation capital of the world, where people now can see options before them that change their lives, increase their health, and give us an idea of the prosperity for a long time to come to us, because we need you, we want you to be a part of this, continuing to move forward. And with that is now my pleasure. I'm so excited, by the way, about the competition that's going to be before you. Actually, one of the competitors comes out of the institute at USC that I just spoke at before coming here. But it is my pleasure to introduce an amazing activist and artist to all of you. Jaden Smith is not just an actor, an entrepreneur, and an artist. He's committed to making a difference in the world around him. His outstanding work on Just Water, which sells spring water in eco-friendly bottles, his involvement to reduce plastic waste in our oceans. He was honored last year with an award from EMA, and we are so blessed to have his activism, his presence, and his artistry bless us here today. Please join me in welcoming Jaden Smith.